What's up, y'all, and welcome to another video. Today we're getting back to doing some reviews. I'm excited to do this one. This is for Halo Campaign Evolved, which is the most recent remake of one of my personal favorite games. You'll notice I've made some changes, kind of prettied it up a little bit, so I'm hoping, I'll keep pumping these out and they'll start looking good. But without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so with this review, we're going to go through some of the history behind Halo Combat Evolved. The game has a long history of many remasters and remakes over the years, and I feel like it's important to kind of highlight where this game has been to kind of contextualize the current remake. We'll talk about why this even happened. Why did they remake this game again? I think that's an interesting question and something worth considering even when doing the review. I have a lot of thoughts about this game and kind of the future of Halo, which I'll probably spin into a separate video, but just kind of briefly touching on it here. We'll talk about the main campaign, and what I mean by that is the actual remake of the Halo 1 campaign. This game also includes a few extra missions, but I think the vast majority of people are going to be going into this primarily for that original campaign, and this is a remake of that, and therefore I think kind of the crux of the review should be focused on it, but I will also give some thoughts on the extra missions as they are part of the package, and worth discussing for sure. And then I'll overall give a score to the game and discuss whether or not I would recommend it. Pretty self-explanatory, but let's get into the overall Halo history. So, Halo was first released in November of 2001, which makes it, 25 years old at this point, or just about. It was an original Xbox exclusive. I think that's pretty widely known, but I think it's important to highlight, especially in the current days of Microsoft playing around with this idea of exclusivity again. Halo was supposed to be a console seller, and it very much did. I'm sure you could do a very good statistical breakdown of how many units that Halo seemingly sold on its own, and it would be a very high amount, especially relative to the overall sales of the original Xbox. It was also a huge critical success. It still has a 97 on Metacritic, very high. It's considered a classic, and with good reason. It's an incredible shooter and one of the first great console shooters. GoldenEye certainly holds that title, coming out on the Nintendo 64 earlier than this, but to me this is the one that really revolutionized how to do a twin stick shooter, and deserves a lot of credit for console shooters that come after. Following this 2001 release, the game was re-released for PC in 2003. Microsoft Windows gaming. I think it actually predated that initiative, but this came out for PC with basically it being the same game. There were some small changes to the campaign. Some new weapons were included. For example, small things like, you can now pick up fuel rod cannons. There were a lot of new multiplayer maps, and you could also use the flamethrower in multiplayer. All pretty cool changes that made it, I would say a re-release rather than just a port of the game. It is a slightly different experience, the 2003 Halo version. The game was then re-released again in 2011 to celebrate its 10-year anniversary for the Xbox 360. Worth noting, this was actually developed by 343 Studios. At least that's what I saw when I was doing some research for this video. I actually did not know that 343 did this original Halo Anniversary Edition. Kind of cool, because they later obviously go on to take over the full franchise. The game was overall well received. It has a much lower 82 on Metacritic. I think this is largely due to kind of lukewarm reception for the overall visual package of the game. It was very cool that you could switch between the original version of the graphics and the anniversary edition of the graphics. Like, you could do that on the fly by just pressing a button. That was a really cool feature. But the actual new version of the game in terms of visuals was pretty lacking in a lot of ways. A lot of the ways that environments looked unique to Halo were kind of lost in this version of the game. Forerunner structures looked completely different. There's a lot of great videos about kind of how they missed the mark on designing these structures to where they really don't follow the same ethos or design philosophy that the original did, which kind of makes it a failing in my opinion, because it is supposed to be a remaster of the original. It's not supposed to be its own thing. It's supposed to just like bring the original into a new generation. And if they messed around because they messed around so much with the visual style, it largely did not do that. It's worth noting also that this game did not have standalone multiplayer. If you purchased the game, if I'm remembering correctly, you got access to Halo CE maps and modes in Halo Reach, so it was not actually standalone multiplayer. I think this is often misconstrued, saying that this Anniversary Edition had multiplayer. It was very much just like Halo Reach multiplayer, but with like a kind of a package of maps and weapons and tweaks to go along with it. So then Halo CE gets another re-release in November of 2014 along the Master Chief Collection. It's worth noting that the Master Chief Collection had really rocky start in terms of server quality and things like that. But in terms of the quality of the remaster, I think it was very good. The graphics were not really messed with. You could play Anniversary Edition, you could play the original. The game just had better frame rate and improved resolution quality for all the games in the package. At the time of release, I think it was just Halo 1, 2, and 3. Or maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 even. But they later added the remaining Halo games. CE was with that original release, though, and it's a good re-release of the game. And when I play Halo CE to this day, I play this version, as do I think most people. And then, of course, we come to the current version of the game, Halo Campaign Evolved, which was announced in 2024. Different from the previous versions, this is an entirely new video game. This is not a remaster. This is a true remake. The game is made fresh from the ground up using Unreal Engine 5. It is very much borrowing heavily from the original game. It in a lot of ways is the same game. So it's kind of really towing that line between remaster or remake. But it is on a new engine. It is a new foundation. They aren't like reskinning the old code, basically. This is new code that now Halo Studios, formerly 343, has written in and recreated this game. It has been released on Xbox, but then notably it was also released on PlayStation. That's the first time that Halo has been on PlayStation. And overall, it has had a mixed reception. There's a lot of people that have a lot of positive things to say about it. And there are a lot of, really ardent detractors of this version of the game. A very loud, I would say, loud minority on the internet that are hating on this game in a lot of ways. And we'll get into my thoughts on the game right now. So, why remake the game again? I think there are a lot of reasons that I can see this making some sense. 343 Studios, which is now Halo Studios, has received a lot of turnover. A lot of people have left, started their own things, joined different companies, and so even before that, 343 is not Bungie, the original creators of the game. So I think kind of taking a step back after Halo Infinite and saying, okay, we want to make Halo games going forward, but we need to kind of recapture what it means for us to release a Halo game. What does that mean? Like, what should our version of Halo look like? Let's kind of hone our skills by working on the original, as the original being the backbone, right? So it's like they're kind of borrowing from what Bungie did, but taking their own spin on it. And then hopefully, my hope is that they'll take what they've learned and then make good new Halo games with this as like kind of a foundation. I do wonder if this started as a tech demo. I think, there was probably a push internally to stop using the Halo engine, and instead of developing a new Halo engine, use Unreal Engine 5, which is, what happened here. I think this makes sense because, Unreal Engine is, from what I understand, cheaper to just use rather than kind of developing your own engine. It certainly would decrease development time after you kind of got your foot in the door, like making a game like this. For future Halos, it should decrease development time. Now that you're using a well-established engine, so I think that may have been like this may have been a pitch. Like, okay, let's see if this is fun. Maybe they did like Silent Cartographer. That's the earliest mission they showed, so that's the only reason I say that. But like maybe they did that mission, like, hey, look at this, and then somebody played it and was like, this is actually incredibly fun. Why don't we just do the whole game? I think it's very possible that that's how this came about. I have no proof of that. It just kind of feels that way. It screams a lot of times, like when I'm playing the game, I think about like those, like maybe like Instagram or whatever videos of like, oh, we, look at this but in Unreal Engine, and it'll be like, original Zelda but in Unreal Engine, and someone's done like a kind of a 20-second clip of what it might look like, right? They haven't developed the whole game. This feels almost like that. Like, look at Halo but in Unreal Engine is kind of how it feels a lot of the time. And then lastly, I put here a Game Pass snack. I think Microsoft very much, especially when they were still under Phil Spencer, had the intention of kind of filling out that Game Pass catalog and making it feel like a good value to consumers without devoting too many resources. And so, last year we got Gears of War Reloaded, which was the second time that game had been, I would say, remastered. That game was not remade. And then now we get this Halo Combat Evolved, or Campaign Evolved. I wonder if the Xbox is still under Phil Spencer at this point, if we're already receiving an announcement of something like a Fable remake alongside the new Fable, or, I don't know, something else using one of their older properties, just like these somewhat lower effort, because you're not writing a new story, you're not redesigning all the levels, but lower effort games to fill out that Game Pass catalog. So I think that this may have originally served as something like that, especially considering it doesn't have multiplayer, and that may have been part of the reason it was remade. I didn't put it on the list, but I also think that there was this big cross-compatible release games on everything push by Phil Spencer, and bringing Halo to PlayStation, it makes sense to bring Halo to PlayStation starting with the first game. And so they were either going to, release Master Chief Collection for PlayStation, which I actually think would have been a great idea, or, starting fresh, making a new remake, just like they did with Gears of War Reloaded, and release that on PlayStation. And so that's what happened. Obviously, that's not the direction Xbox is going now, but these are some ideas I have of why this ever got made to begin with. Okay, so now we're going to get into kind of the meat of the review. What did I find that were... I'm going to talk about the positives and then the negatives. Kind of broad strokes here, but I think, these will kind of give an impression of what stood out for me for this game. I think the game actually looks fantastic. I've seen a lot of complaints that the game loses Halo's original style, things like that. I actually think, generally speaking, that is not the case. I think the game looks and feels more like the original Halo, or I guess looks, focusing on the looks, than that campaign anniversary. Obviously, I think that the original Halo has a very distinct visual style, and some of that, I guess, is lost in the translation to Unreal Engine. But I felt it, everything looked and felt like Halo to me. I thought the Forerunner structures felt more like the original Halo than they did Anniversary. And they're in line with, what Halo 2 and 3 kind of did, iterating on Forerunner architecture and things like that. I thought the natural environments looked fantastic. I don't think they look generic. I think they look like Halo. I don't really see the complaints there. And even the Covenant ships looked really good too. I I think those were a little samey with the visuals, where like I have the same problem with the original game though, of like, you know, you start running through those Covenant ships on like Keys and on Truth and Reconciliation, like there is a little bit of sameness that kind of creeps in at a certain point to the environment. But you know, overall, I think the game still looked good. One big visual change they made to the environments is they started, as you encounter the Flood, 343 Guilty Spark and onward in the game, you see an evolution and an increase in the amount of Flood gunk and stuff in the environment as they're taking over the Halo ring. And that is like a key plot point to the game, and to see that visually represented within the level design, I think is really smart, and I think they did a really nice job with the visuals of this game. So much so that it deserved its own slide. Okay, and then now some just general points about the game design that I felt that were, you know, overall a very positive part of the experience of playing this game. The level design itself, they largely left most of the levels designed in almost the exact same way they were in the original. If I followed the route that I would take playing the original game, which I played, you know, over 100 times easily, you know, I'm going to get to the end objective. But starting with 343 Guilty Spark, there are more slight changes to level design. And then you get to the library, a famously much maligned Halo level. The library is fully redesigned and is a completely different experience. I don't think it was perfect. I think there could have been more visual variety in the library. But I think overall it is a much more interesting level design. And I enjoyed that. And I'm also totally fine with them not changing the level design of many of the other missions. You know, this being a remake, one could argue like they needed to do more of their own sort of thing. I think that's, I guess, fair. But I think, you know, you're remaking a classic. If it's not broken, you know, don't try to fix it. And some of these are the most, you know, well received and well remembered levels of any shooter. You know, don't mess around with them. Just present them as they were. They did do some fun little things. One that stuck out to me that kind of illustrates the point is in Assault on the Control Room. If you're a long-term Halo fan, you know that about, you know, 2/3 of the way through the level, you can beat a elite to his Banshee and skip the majority of the level. I think that they did a really fun thing where they integrated that to where Cortana actually tells you, like, hey, make a run for the Banshee or something along those lines. And then you go take the Banshee and complete the level. I suppose you could miss that opportunity and then go through the remainder of the level the normal way. I haven't played it a second time yet. But just the fact that it's kind of incorporated as a mission objective and the normal path of the game, I think is really cool. Because it was such an easy skip in the original game. It's not like really a secret. I was doing it before I was on the internet searching for these sorts of things. It's really easy to get that Banshee, but it's fun that it's incorporated into the level design. And they did little hints and things like that to Halo's history throughout the game. That probably is the most apparent one, but there are other ones, and I think they were fun when encountered. Weapons. They, you know, included all the original Halo weapons, but obviously now you get some new stuff too. They incorporated like the needle rifle, the SMG. You can get a fuel rod cannon, which you couldn't in the original. You could use the sword, which you couldn't in the original. The sentinel beams are usable and are good against the Flood, which I'll get into in a second. But overall, I think these weapons were really well integrated. They were integrated in ways that made sense. It wasn't just like, oh, you're running through a Covenant ship and here's a SMG or something like that. Like, you know, they were just kind of included into the loot pool in places that made a lot of sense. Probably the highlight of that highlight for me was the Sentinel Beam, of all things. I'm probably the only one making this take. But I've always felt that the Sentinel Beam should have been a power weapon. I mean, the gun is, you know, a Forerunner weapon designed to kill Flood, right? Like, you know, 343 is like, you got to upgrade your weapons. These aren't good enough to kill the Flood. And, you know, he has his little Sentinels that kill Flood for you. In later Halo games, you could get Sentinel Beams, and they were pretty much useless. in this game, the Sentinel beam does kill Flood really effectively, and I think that just makes sense from a lore perspective, and it was a very useful weapon for me later in the game. And then just finally, Halo has kind of always been designed with a gameplay loop in mind. You can look this up on the internet. You can find lots of interviews that the original Bungie guys would give about they wanted to have Halo would have like this 30 seconds of fun. Like you go, you enter this room, you have this encounter with the elites or the Flood or whatever, and you fight them, you shoot them, you throw grenades, you melee, and then you rinse and repeat. But that loop of an enemy encounters should always be entertaining and varied enough that like you're always feeling like the encounters are different and fun. They did that really well in this game. I mean, obviously they didn't change everything by any means. Enemies are largely where they were in the original game, but they did do a really good job of designing the gunplay in this game to feel really good. Throwing grenades feels really good. Shooting the weapons largely feels excellent. So that loop is intact, and it's almost the most fun I've had playing a Halo game in quite a while. Okay, so now we're going to get into the negatives. There are definitely some negatives that I had. This is not a perfect game by any means, and there are some things that I really wish that Halo Studios had done differently or better. I thought the cutscenes were bad. I just don't think they really highlight the things that they should highlight. It's almost just like these weird action montages for the Chief, for the most part, and these, weren't really directed that well. So that wasn't, they didn't really have the impact they should have had. The dialogue is bad, which I'll get into with the audio design, but that definitely permeates into these cutscenes quite a bit. I don't really like the camera shots. There are, moments where, Cortana is in the, control room and she's huge. I get what they're kind of trying to do there. I would have kept it more close to what the original was, I think. They definitely took some leaps with their cutscene direction, and ultimately I felt that they were worse than what was presented in the original game. To continue with things that are worse here than they were in the original game. Generally, the audio design of this game is bad, and at times actively distracts and detracts from the overall experience. I think you can have, like bad dialogue or like poorly acted dialogue. In this case, it felt like the acting coach or director for these like very talented actors and actresses that played the original Chief and Cortana, whatever direction they were getting from Halo Studios in redoing these lines wasn't very good. And I suppose they could have been given creative freedom, and that was just their own take, and that's unfortunate because ultimately I just don't think it's as good as the original. I think the line delivery in the original is significantly better, and so all these key scenes for the story are, not as good in this version of the game. I just think it's a little bit of a letdown. Obviously, the Halo story, especially for the first game, it's not the highlight, but these are areas where Halo Studios actively tried to make changes, and I think the changes were ultimately worse than what was presented in the original. Overall, I really enjoy the gameplay of this game, but I did have some minor complaints. One silly one is the sword is just too slow. It isn't that good. Like, it's slow to take out. It doesn't have a ton of range. I think it should have been more like the Halo 2 sword. Just make it a power weapon. This is a campaign-only experience. You're not really shouldn't be concerned about balancing weapons or multiplayer, things like that, unless they, I guess, are going to do multiplayer at some point. I don't think they will. And so it's just kind of weird to care and make it such a balanced weapon. Just make it really good, make it fun to use. I guess don't make it game breaking, but it wasn't in Halo 2, and I just think it could have been more fun. And this just the act of reloading felt kind of awkward and bad. This may even get resolved in a patch, but there are plenty of times where I swear I clicked the reload button and it just did not trigger, and I had to click it again. This happened to me the entire time I was playing this game. It was never so much of an annoyance that it really got to me, but it definitely was noticeable. So just a couple minor complaints there. minor visual complaints. I think the art design is a lot better than Anniversary. I really do. I think it's a really, really good looking game. But the original definitely has the most concise, consistent art direction of it, Anniversary, and this. And it still is, I would say, the best visual design for the video game. This is obviously has the highest fidelity and looks fantastic, and the environments look great, the natural environments. But in terms of thinking about what the Covenant ships look like, what the elites look like, the grunts, the Forerunner structures, I think the original is still the best, and it's gonna be, it will always be. And then this is kind of a visual complaint, kind of a gameplay complaint. Some of the environments, changes they made the environment smaller. You feel this a lot on Assault on the Control Room more than any other level, and I guess two Portrayals because it's the same map. The caves, the caverns, they don't feel as grandiose because they literally are smaller. And I just feel like this was a strange change. I don't know if this was made to try to focus the gameplay a little bit more, less time traveling between things. But ultimately, it just kind of felt a little claustrophobic, and I enjoyed these like wide open spaces that the Chief ends up in the original a little better for those couple of levels. And then finally, the game just holds your hand too much. There's so many objective markers that you're constantly being told, okay, you just got here, you need to go 10 feet over here. It's like, I know, I got it. And I know I've played this game many, many times, and maybe, I even got lost, or, in the first few times I played the game when I was a kid. But that's part of the fun. That's part of playing a video game. You shouldn't just have to follow a friggin', diamond-shaped objective marker to everything. So that is definitely a complaint of mine. You can turn them off. Obviously, I did, but definitely an annoyance. And then one thing I forgot to put on this, and it is honestly probably my largest complaint in the game, so I'm surprised I forgot to put this on this slide. The game does not allow you to go out of bounds. Part of what made Halo so special in its original release was this ability to break the map. You could stack some warthogs and grenade yourself up above the level, or you could clip behind something and escape the level in other areas, and that was cool and fun, and it added a level of replayability to the game, and Bungie was like pretty cool with that. They were like, okay, people really like this. And then in later Halos, Halo 2, starting with Halo 2, they incorporated that breaking of the map into the game's code. Like, they left it in almost intentionally. They knew people could get out. They placed skulls in places outside of the traditional map that would alter the way the game played. And that's how skulls came to be. This game loves skulls. There's like 40-something skulls in this game that alter the game mechanics, which is cool. It makes for great replayability. I think that's a positive for the game. But for it to have such a focus on that heritage of exploration, but then not allow the player to break the confines of the map is a real bummer. And I don't know if that's just like an engine limitation with Unreal Engine 5. I would imagine there's got to be ways to do it. And I'm just kind of bummed that that's the way that it works. And then lastly, before I give an overall score, some extra mission thoughts. Obviously, this is a longer review, but some extra mission thoughts. I thought these were really decent. I wouldn't say they're great, but it's you as Chief with Sergeant Johnson completing this mission on this Covenant craft a couple years before the original game. It is fine, like the levels are actually pretty well designed, I thought, and there is a decent like little story hooks and things like that I won't spoil since this is new content. There are brutes in there. I guess that's a slight spoiler, but the brutes are fun to fight. They did a good job of integrating those. They're difficult in the same way that they were in like Halo 2, which I think is cool and fun. And so I think overall they were good and a fun like beat them in a day kind of thing. Am I going to go back and play these extra missions as much as I might go back and play the original campaign? No, probably not. But I think I'll at least play through them on Legendary once, and get any terminals or skulls or whatever in the future. One thing that I feel like I need to say, because the internet is just such a weird place, is like there's these complaints that there's this female protagonist that's insufferable and woke, and this is just like a complete non-issue. That's not a thing. Like you know, she's just another character in the game. Yeah, she has her gripes with Chief, but it all gets resolved by the end. It's a much ado about nothing kind of situation, and I think it's all pretty silly. Okay, so what is my overall score and recommendation for the game? I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I think that's probably pretty strong compared to other reviews for this game, because ultimately I think the foundation is really there. This is like a 9 out of 10 game foundation with some like key mistakes, both with the kind of lack of awareness with kind of the heritage of Halo and exploration, and that not really being incorporated into this re-release in any meaningful way. And then my other main complaint being the audio direction of this game, which was really just not that great. The voiceovers were not good, and the even like the gun sounds and everything were just not as good as the original. But everything else was really good, and I think Halo Studios succeeded in making a Halo game that's really, really fun to play. That's an accomplishment, because I didn't really feel that way about Infinite. I know a lot of people did. I didn't. Or 4, or Halo 4, which are their other two main efforts. So for me, this is a big step forward for them, and I also just find the game to be really visually pleasing, and it's a version of this game that I will play again. I will probably play the original still. I don't see myself switching and like, oh, this is the only version of the game, but it's definitely one worth playing, I think, and I would recommend it, especially to Halo fans. With Xbox games, there's always kind of this split of, do you have Game Pass? Should you download it and play it? Yeah, absolutely. There's no question. Like, this is a super fun game, and if you already have Game Pass, there's no question that this is worth your time to play. Do you not have Game Pass or don't play on a Microsoft console, so you have to pay $70, I think, on PlayStation for this game? Should you buy it? Yeah, you could. I mean, I don't think it would be a terrible purchase. As with most things, the frugally minded are going to wait for a sale. But like, I don't, like if you wanted a new fun game, I think there's enough replayability in these levels, and there's enough content just there to start that like I could certainly say, there's enough there to recommend spending $70. And then lastly, like if you don't have Game Pass but you have an Xbox, I think it's like $50. And I would recommend it at that price. I think it's a good game, and I think it's worth $50. So kind of 3 things, but overall, I would say, thumbs up, and I would recommend the game. So I alluded to earlier, I have a lot of thoughts about like where I think Halo should go in the future, so I might do a video about that soon. But this is my overall review of Halo Campaign Evolved. Thanks for listening.